Welcome, everybody. So, this is the third edition, I believe, of the Community Office Hours, which is a live stream show where we try to answer questions from the community live with engineers. And today I have with me Drew Bailey and Seth Honig. Did I pronounce that correctly?
It's close enough, yeah.
All right.
You're right.
I could have pronounced it in a bit more European way, but it
It
would
is
be.
German, it's hungry,
Oh,
yeah.
and you're both switched as well. So I'll fix your names while we start answering the questions. But it's Seth is actually Drew and Drew is actually Seth. So I'll address that. So to start off, could you both maybe introduce yourselves with the correct name? Do you want to start
Sure,
off?
Sure, I'll
Seth?
go first.
Oh, Drew, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I'll go ahead and take it. Drew Bailey. I'm a Nomad engineer. Seth and I actually started on the same day. I don't know how many months ago, maybe 7-ish,
September 20 something.
9th maybe. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, nice. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and I'm Seth. I also started on the same day as Drew. Also very happy to be here. Fun fact, I've never used Nomad before. I just work here.
Oh,
I
that'll
come
be
from
great.
I came from a Mesos shop, and it's 6 years of messing with that, and came to Nomad when we started migrating to Kubernetes. So happy to be here.
Nice. I'm sure we can draw some parallels with the other products later on. Now, one of the questions we got asked, and it was apparently something that happens more often, and it's something people are confused with, which is what is the difference between a parameterized job and a batch job? Does any of you want to tackle that one first?
Sure. Parameterized job, I mean, it's kind of in the name. It's more like a template of a job that you can submit with variables, and then those variables get filled in, and then the actual job executes given those parameters. A batch job is more like just a classic job definition. It's not going to change from run to run.
Okay, so more like I already deploy my service, let's say, and I trigger execution of it with parameters. Is that like a
It's
decent
the
sum up?
elevator pitch, yeah.
Okay. All right.
And a parameterized job is of type of batch job, right? They both will run to completion and then not get rescheduled instead of like a service or system job where they'll always be trying to run.
Yeah, I mean, parameterized jobs are kind of like Nomad's best kept secret. Like, it's a very powerful tool, and I think a lot of people don't ever even realize it exists.
Yeah.
It's kind of unfortunate.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like if you look at some of the cool use cases of what people have done with parameterized jobs, and like just take for instance the first example that was given when it was launched back in like way back of encoding like a video encoding pipeline where it would like trigger in steps. Like that was a very cool use case. So I agree, definitely a feature people should look at more.
Yeah. I think even last time, one of our other engineers, Nick, mentioned he uses parameterized jobs to check into Southwest flights.
Right.
So give it like your flight confirmation number, the time that your flight is, whatever. You submit that, and Nomad just sits and waits until the right time and takes care of it for you.
That is perfect.
Do the best seat on the plane.
Get that A boarding group, man.
That actually leads me into another question, because you would want to have that trigger at a certain time, right? You wouldn't want to have to do the check-in yourself still. So is Nomad a good replacement for cron jobs?
Absolutely. Next question.
Could you
Drew,
elaborate
do you want
on
to talk
that?
about this?
Yeah, I mean, well, it can easily mimic a lot of the features of a cron job, and then like if you're mixing it in with something like a parameterized job, like it's I don't know, more flexible to me at least. I don't often like. I feel like everywhere I've worked, we've come up with an elaborate way to replace actual cron jobs. So having something like Nomad that will take care of like the timing for you is definitely a plus there.
Yeah, and even on top of that, like if the rest of your infrastructure is based on Nomad services and that kind of thing, like just having consistency of managing your crons through Nomad is nice. You'll get all of your, hopefully you have monitoring and all that kind of stuff plumbed together through Nomad. And like, you don't have to deal with setting up custom stuff for your cron tab files, which is kind of hairy.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
guess it also like abstracts a little bit that layer of like normally you would need access to those cron tab files, whereas
Mhm.
now you can abstract it more towards the developer layer, let's say.
You can even go a step further and kind of make the argument that you maybe shouldn't be using things like Puppet and Chef and all that stuff to manage your cron tab files at that kind of level anymore,
Yeah.
and instead be building like AMI images or whatever using Packer or similar tools and like just pushing out a new machine every time you have upgrades. It's very modern for a lot of companies, I realize. But
Yeah.
it's kind of the direction I think people should be going.
I totally agree. So let's say for those people that would be moving towards Nomad, one of the questions we got was, okay, I'm running Nomad with systemd, which is like a fairly common thing to do, especially when you're building images and you want it to automatically start. How would you handle secure introduction of secrets? Let's, for instance, say a vault token to be used with Nomad.
Yeah, this I feel like this one definitely comes up a lot, and there's a few answers. Some of which I've tried, some of which I haven't. But I think you could use console template to render like the vault token file, or you could still use systemd, but like instead of using exec start, you could kind of replace it with just like an exec script to call out to that would do like your script would do some pre-work and fetch the vault file and then exec Nomad, and then that way you still are responding to like signals and stuff using systemd, but you also have this script file where you can do like your pre-work necessary to like go fetch your vault token.
And then you would probably do authentication to Vault with like a role for the machine that you're on, maybe with cloud metadata, or is that right?
Yeah, I think so. It definitely
Yeah,
seems like there's still like an opportunity to, you know, like the bootstrapping problem is always definitely a little difficult. So
yeah.
it'd be interesting to
The
yeah, go
hashtag
ahead.
bootstrapping problem is interesting. There's a lot of chicken and egg going on, right? Because it'd be great if Nomad could like just automatically pop up with all the right configs given Vault and Console, but at the same time, you want Vault and Console to like run in Nomad so that you don't have to worry about them. Like
Yeah.
that's a story that I think we very much want to improve, but it's a little bit further down the line.
Yeah, there are basically two sides as well, right? You have the people that think, okay, everything should start with console and Vault, and then Nomad makes use of those. And then
Yeah,
you
yeah,
have the other side, which I'm a big fan of, is have just Nomad on a machine and then deploy everything on top of that.
yes. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it kind of depends like which each organization introduces themselves with, like whether they start using Vault first, or they start using Console first, or they start using Nomad first. Kind of dictates how they're going to start actually bootstrapping the other components.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it'll be better. But yeah.
Well, it has improved a lot. Like if you look at all the cloud joining and etc. that has been added over the past versions, that really helps a lot with the bootstrapping already, I think.
Oh yeah, certainly.
Um, so a question for both of you. Nomad supports a great variety of drivers for tasks and devices. What are some of the most often requested ones that you have heard, and what are some of the craziest ones that you've heard?
I saw on the Discuss forums for in terms of like one of the more interesting ones was basically, I forget off the hand, but it's like he had like a single machine with like a bunch of different like Mac apps that all were basically the same but had different bundle IDs or something to get around like only being able to run like one instance of an app or something like that on
Yeah.
a host. So he was writing like a task driver to be able to support that. But in terms of ones that like people seem to be showing a lot of interest in, Podman is definitely showing some interest, and seems like that's something that we're going to be like supporting under the HashiCorp name. Firecracker seems interesting. People talk a lot about WebAssembly, which I think would be really cool to see.
Yes, definitely.
The Go support for WASI isn't like super there right now, but like in the Kubernetes side of things, Microsoft, I think it's Microsoft, is working on Crustlet, which is kind of like a Rust Kubernetes. What is it? Resource driver? Oh, I forget the Kubernetes term for it, but like it'd be really cool to see a Rust device driver or plugin driver for Nomad that was able to compile and run WebAssembly jobs. That would be a lot of fun.
Oh, so would that job then actually compile the code and run it like at runtime? Like you would just pass it code, or would you actually pass it a compiled WASM?
I think you pass it the compiled WASM, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'd have to take another look at it.
This got me thinking. Now I want to see like a go get task driver. You just give it like the URL, and then it uses go get to install the command and run it. That'd be so awesome.
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
Or a Docker file device driver where you just pass it a Docker file and it builds it and runs it.
Yeah.
Let's just put those on the backlog. Okay. So another issue that a lot of people like run into is I'm now running all my applications on Nomad. It's awesome, but now I need things to be able to connect to that. So how do you handle ingress on Nomad, and what are some of the solutions you've heard before? You want to go first, Seth?
Yeah, ingress is one of those things that we're really working on as a company as a whole. So Nomad, I kind of like to think is kind of behind Console, where Console is leading the development and roadmap of like what the future of networking really is going to look like. As of right now, Nomad only supports mesh gateways. So that's kind of like point-to-point service communication using MTLS and all that kind of stuff. And that's been in Console since I think 1.6 maybe. But now that Console 1.8 is out, there are more types of gateways, including terminating gateways and ingress gateways. But they're both in beta right now, I believe.
Yes, that's correct.
But that those two features together should really improve the story of how external services communicate with services in your cluster. As for right now, if you don't want to run beta software, I think the most common thing people do is run Fabio, which is kind of an open source reverse proxy that integrates nicely with Console and uses Console Service Discovery along with like labeled tags or whatever for your services, to redirect traffic however you want. I know Trafic, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, is another one. Yeah. I've never used it myself, but I've heard things. And then you can do what I do for my own personal stuff, which is I run Caddy with a whole bunch of like Console template plumbing to make it all work. It's kind of gross, but hey, whatever works.
Yeah, I think Trafic and Fabio both are in the solution where they use console tags to configure itself, right?
Yeah. That's probably the best way to go.
I think the other solution, the only one that I know of, is then Glue, which would be like an API gateway to put in front of it.
Oh yeah.
That has more like a configuration based approach where you actually have to configure the API gateway, which then does the rest itself.
Yeah. And certainly stay tuned for better integrations with like all this configuration type stuff with console. It's on the roadmap somewhere, um, but it takes time to actually integrate those features in a way that is first and foremost secure, uh, but then also to make it like actually easier to use in Nomad rather than just plumbing everything together yourself. And that takes a lot of time to just kind of develop and figure out. So eventually.
Yeah. Were there any other solutions you wanted to add, Drew?
I mean, Nginx is always there, tried and true, nice and easy enough to always just. I I don't know. I mean, Nginx is certainly not as like exciting as Traffic or Fabio, but a lot of people still use it, so I think it's worth mentioning.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if this is something we can really talk about, but there's should be allegedly better integration between Nginx and console in the future. So
Nice.
we'll see.
Some other people were suggesting something called go between, apparently as another option. So that might be interesting for people watching to check
I'll be
out.
honest,
As
I've
well.
never heard of it, but great name.
Neither have I, so I'm definitely going to be checking it out. And speaking of the integration between Nomad and console, the Connect integration has been amazing for myself. I've been using it every time, to the point where if I now have to do service discovery in Nomad manually, I just don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah, same here.
That's how easy it is. Can we expect some of the features that Console Connect have as to be more integrated? You were already saying that you're working on making that integration better and better, but say for instance the central configuration, are those things that might end up in Nomad's stanza?
Yeah, the most accurate answer I can give right now is maybe. Central config is interesting because like it's not something that needs to be in your Nomad config. It would just be simpler, I think.
Yeah.
Or easier for Nomad job submitters. At the end of the day, we kind of have to, and this is above my pay grade, but we have to balance what features we really want to provide at what time. And I think central config is kind of a little more off in the distance than it is something we'd work on next. If only because it's possible to use it right now without the Nomad integration.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been abusing the task dependency features to do most of this by just running the console container and then registering it that way. Then you still have it in your Nomad job, but
yeah.
unofficially. So Drew, you've been working on the audit features of Nomad lately. Now,
Yeah.
I'm assuming that has a lot of plumbing and infrastructure that is required for all of that to work. Are there any future use cases that we might see using all that you've built?
Yeah. Like when it's funny because like when people say audit logging, their mind immediately goes to like eventing, and it's kind of like what we all wanted to do. Is like audit logging is definitely like super important on the enterprise side of things. But like while we were building audit logging, we wanted to make sure that we had eventing in mind. So like the whole way that it's built and constructed is really kind of like this. It's intended to be more of like a general use case where audit logging is like one aspect of things, but the support for like a general eventing pipelines is there. It's definitely something that's on our roadmap. I don't think we're going to see in 0.12, but I think hopefully like a 1.0 would have generic eventing. So yeah, like it's the groundwork has been laid, and it's definitely something that we know there's a lot of community interest around. Everyone wants to be able to get more insight into what their cluster is doing and be able to make like all sorts of pretty dashboards or like programmatically react to certain events happening within the cluster. So hopefully generic eventing will be there soon.
That sounds really awesome. Like I'm super excited to like build all sorts of things that could plug into that. Would that be actual Nomad plugins that I would have to deploy with Nomad, like task drivers, or would it be more of an external thing, or is that still unknown?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's still unknown, but it'll be interesting because Nomad, Vault, and Console are kind of all adopting this general eventing pipeline library to support audit logging and eventually like generic eventing. So whatever approach we'll take, we'll probably want to make sure like it feels the same across all the products, kind of like the approach we took with audit logging. We didn't want to create a different audit logging solution for console and Nomad. We wanted to kind of feel like holistic. So that'll probably be like a fun cross product brainstorming session to see like kind of the best way to configure different like pipelines and ways to subscribe to different events and that sort of thing.
Yeah, makes sense. Oh, and I just remembered that before the show, we were actually talking about a question that got answered a while back in a previous edition of this show, and you had some ideas on that, Drew. And the question was, could you replace Docker Compose with Nomad, and how would something like that work? And you had some interesting
Yeah.
ideas on that, I remember.
Yeah, our tech lead will probably get mad at me. Schmeingel will probably get mad at me for saying, like, the surface level, it doesn't seem like that hard to parse through the like a Docker Compose file and just either spit out a minimal job file or just start running like kind of like a minimal job file of I don't know, like at a basic level, maybe just like supporting like port mapping or something like that. But yeah, like I don't know, Docker Compose. I feel like we could get a Nomad Compose with
It sounds like your next hackathon project.
yeah, it does seem like one of those things that would be cool to get like very like sketchily working in a few days, but no, maybe we'd be able to build out the groundwork for some sort of conversion tool or even just start running those sorts of files.
And what's going to be the next thing after that? Is it going to be Kubernetes to Nomad job file?
You joke,
Yeah.
but dot.
No, but I think it would be very interesting for people that have a local setup running on Compose, and then being able to convert that to something that might run in production. I think is like a very nice
Yeah.
first step for that conversion.
Yeah, I mean, like, sorry,
No, go
just
ahead.
like one of the benefits for me, at least for like Nomad, is it's so easy to run locally. So sure, like sometimes you might have to have like a development job file versus your like production job file, but I don't know. The story for running Nomad locally compared to some other things is really nice. It's the first workload orchestrator I've ever wanted to use locally or try to use locally. So yeah,
Yeah, I'll second that. Nomad locally is wonderful.
Right.
Yeah.
Have to agree. And I think now we support most of the core elements that you would need, right, to use it as a compose replacement, because you can do things with volumes now, mounting things from the host. There's now the network namespaces, which actually gives you sort of the networks feature. So yeah, we're slowly getting there.
I know internally, like our cloud team uses Nomad in production, but they also use it as for their development workflow to like orchestrate all the services and stuff. So it's definitely, people are using it. There's just no throw a Docker Compose file at Nomad right now.
I think that's a nice idea for a video I need to make. Just try it, see what happens.
Yeah,
That'd be fun. Yeah.
So recently with console 1.8, we saw that single sign-on was added to console. And personally, having to juggle all the different access tokens between all the products like can be difficult. Is there a single sign-on coming to Nomad? And like super future vision, would there be like a single sign-on that would work over all the products?
Yeah, definitely above both of our pay grades, but I can tell you there's definitely desire even just
Yeah.
from like our level all the way up, to have just kind of a consistent feel across all products. And I think that definitely includes something like single sign-on.
Yeah.
When
I haven't
Nomad,
looked.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I haven't looked too much into how they did it, other than like the changelog blurb, which says that they're using the OpenID Connect, so OIDC. So I feel like there's definitely a way there to, once Nomad gets it, I can't see a reason. I can't see a shipping a single sign-on and not being able to communicate with console, but I don't know. Maybe that's
Yeah.
still above my pay grade. But
And actually, just fun fact, one of our teammates in the previous hackathon that we had did all the plumbing necessary to get JWT tokens throughout
yeah.
Nomad. So it's definitely possible. It's
That's
just a matter of playing it out and actually getting it done in a consistent, visualized way.
Okay. We also had a question in the chat earlier on, and I think Charlie was also on it answering it, but I think it's good to mention it here as well. So the question was, in a console federated cluster with HCLs, in my primary data center, my Nomad jobs doesn't request the console token to register the services in console, and in the second data center it does.
Yeah. So this, I know
Go
who's asking this. Ticket that was filed a week ago, got opened 10 minutes before I went on PTO, and I just got back. So I will definitely be looking at that later today. My gut instinct is that the federation itself might not be configured correctly, but I really need to sit down and actually investigate. And whenever tickets like this are opened, and whoever posted this did a great job, it helps to have all the config files for all the moving parts just pasted right up front. It saves everyone a lot of time. So thank you, whoever did that. I'll be taking a look later today.
Okay. Then a question about host volumes. I don't know which one of you is the most comfortable with that one. Oh, is that true? Or did you tap out?
I was tapping out.
Oh, okay. So I was wondering, if I have a volume defined on my Nomad client, but I only want to expose part of that volume to my jobs, is there a way to do that other than just creating a lot of host volumes for each of those paths?
Yeah, I think this question's come up in the past a few times before, where you want to mount basically just a subdirectory of your host volume inside your task.
Yes.
And the answer right now is, I want to say no, but I don't see why we wouldn't be able to add that feature if there's enough desire for it, and we can do it in a safe way, which gut feeling seems like it should be possible.
Yeah,
Host
I don't
volumes,
see
yeah.
why it wouldn't, because if you do need that very strict separation, you could always still create all the separate host volumes, and limit it that way. So yeah.
And of course, as always, contributions welcome. I mean,
Yep.
I don't think features like this are interesting. They would definitely alleviate some pain point for some people out there, but it's not something that is so critical that it would actually make a difference in whether someone chooses Nomad over an alternative. So it's hard for us to justify spending the 3 days, week and a half it would take to implement that. So if it's really important, let us know. If you'd like to cut your teeth on Nomad, that might actually be a really good ticket to do that with.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like something that would be too difficult from the outset, but it could always turn into one of those things that might be very difficult.
Yeah, who knows? Every time I work on a new thing in Nomad, I think, oh, this will take me 2 days, and then 2 weeks later, oh, it'll take me 3 more weeks. It's, yeah, there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of stuff we do. So
Yeah, and then if you look at what you've been working on with the whole networking, that's also
Yeah.
one of the very hairy bits of like the operating system that can take a lot of time to figure out.
Oh man, I learned so much about port filtering, like all that stuff, CNI. Like I didn't know any of that stuff before I started here. Like just as a normal developer, like the network just kind of works, and the network team takes care of it, right? Now that I'm actually implementing all this stuff, it's very much a learning experience, um, but it's fun. It's good.
Yeah, it's difficult. And one of the questions we had about the integration basically with the network namespaces is right now you have the choice between either bridged, like entirely separated, or exposing it to the host,
Yeah,
but
host networking, sure.
it basically binds to all IPs, right? So it's then accessible from outside that
The
machine as well.
first public address, yes.
Yeah.
Or if you configure one, yeah.
Is there a way to only expose it to the local machine itself? Say, for instance, I have a job. In this case, it's about a telegraph job, basically to get statistics out of the machine or metrics. And there's a other service running on the host itself, and it needs to be able to access that job, but that job needs to be using Connect to communicate with, I believe it's Prometheus or etc. Is there a way to do something like that?
There's at least two ways. One, I mean, use host networking and then be really careful to only bind to local hosts yourself. And then the other way is to use Console Connect and bridge networking, but then communicating back up to the host, anything bound to the host machine local address won't be able to connect. So then you have to be clever in plumbing that connection, which could mean either opening like a Unix socket and communicating through that, or configuring your own DNS server that kind of loops back around and back into the host machine. So it's not a great story right now, but it's definitely something we're working on improving for Nomad 012, which is a network themed release. I think we can say publicly now. So yeah, stay tuned for
That's
better.
cool.
Yeah.
And speaking of that Unix socket,
Mhm.
I believe there were ideas to have Nomad and console communicate via those as well. Is that something that actually happened, or is that something that disappeared from the roadmap?
That is something that happens today for when you configure your service with Console Connect.
Okay.
So Connect, obviously, the sidecar proxy needs to be bootstrapped with the Envoy Bootstrap config, which is something that there is a command in console to generate. And for all that stuff to work, we use this Unix socket and like a net listener on the host side. So all this traffic actually goes through the Nomad client, which is not wonderful, but it works fine. It's not like all the traffic is going through that Unix socket. It's just configuration stuff.
But that's nice because you don't have to open up any ports, do any difficult networking.
Yeah, yeah,
It's just mounting the actual file there, and then you
yeah,
have the
yeah.
communication.
And it's kind of looping back to our why it's so hard to make all these console features actually work in Nomad. Is the plumbing is difficult to get right and secure, and robust is everything's got to be restartable and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, things
Okay.
are getting better.
Yeah. So, well, obviously, Seth, you're working now on all the networking features. Can you tell us anything about what you're working on right now, Drew?
Yeah, sure.
Anything
Right
like
now,
not non-secret, of course.
no, right now I'm working on licensing for Nomad Enterprise. The our enterprise distribution story right now isn't like super great or super flexible. They're basically up in a private S3 bucket, and the distribution of them is pretty manual. All the other products, you can download the enterprise binaries off of releases.hashicorp.com. And yeah, so we want to do that for Nomad. So soon, 0.12, you'll see all the Nomad enterprise binary up on releases.hashicorp.com, and it will come with a trial license. So everyone will be able to download and install it and try out the enterprise features for a couple hours. Yeah, so
That's cool.
that's what I'm working on right now. And yeah, it will be nice from a lot of aspects, like being able to test our enterprise binaries through like more end-to-end. It just opens up a lot of ways when you can easily download the enterprise binary. So it should be pretty nice once it's done.
Yeah, like one of the things like I can imagine like from my previous work would be like I would love to be able to test Nomad with the Sentinel integration, right? To actually do some validation on the jobs that get published, etc.
Yeah,
That would be cool. Because I believe that's the only way to do that right now, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. I think like right now you'd have to probably reach out to someone to ask for some sort of trial, but now it will be a lot easier. You can just go and download it yourself. So
That's cool. Um, so there's a lot of networking related questions today. Sorry, Seth.
It's fine. Bring them on.
I think it's just because networking is difficult. So obviously there's going to be a lot of questions around that.
There's many, many moving parts. Like if you just look at a picture of what Nomad has to do to make Connect work, it's like this belongs on the wiki page for Rube Goldberg machines. Like there's so many moving parts.
Yeah. And one of those parts that someone was struggling with is the CNI plugins. And they were wondering, why do we need to download those?
That's an interesting question. I never really thought about it before. If the CNI plugins are licensed in such a way that we're able to distribute them with the enterprise product, then maybe there's room to make that story better.
yeah.
I don't think we would ever have Nomad just download it directly. That seems kind of shady from a security perspective. Maybe there's things we can do with hashes and whatever else. But yeah, right now it's kind of whoever's putting a cluster together needs to make sure they're actually downloading the right thing. And I don't want to put that burden on Nomad unless we actually have to, or if we can get around it somehow.
Yeah, because I can imagine from a user perspective, it would be nice if you didn't have to worry about it. Because
Actually,
you
yeah,
find out when your job runs and it doesn't.
Yeah, that's a little jank when you run Connect for the first time and like it breaks and it's this weird error message of this plugin not found or whatever. Like, yeah, well, read the instructions. You got to like install the CNI thing first, which is not a great user experience. But even worse or better, however you look at it, if we were to do this, we would be able to upgrade the CNI plugin automatically, which would be wonderful because they've got bug fixes in every release, and we've run into bugs in every release. So that would be nice if we could just have everyone upgrade automatically.
Yeah, but I can see your point where like you want to be able to do it very securely, and probably you want it to be behind a flag so it doesn't, like if people decide that they want to do it manually, they could.
That's an interesting thought. Like I'd love to see someone open a ticket about that and we can discuss it more there.
And another thing that is probably related is then the CSI drivers. Right now you have to mostly deploy them as containers since they are very Kubernetes centric, and then to do that you have to allow for privileged containers on the node instances of that driver. Would that also be something that Nomad could do?
I think so. Kind of like Seth said, there's I think some of for the CSI controllers and nodes, like the jobs that we have up on the learn page, like they're pretty like generic and probably won't change that much to the point where like we might be able to have like an official one. So you'd still have to say like Nomad job. You'd have to say like you still have to run the system jobs, but at least maybe we could maintain the Nomad files. But yeah, I don't know. I think some of the jobs you still might have to pass in some config for authentication. So that would be like, I don't know, maybe that could be some sort of CLI arg or something you pass in. But yeah, they do seem kind of generic, but
Yeah, I think
you know,
I was looking at some of those plugins, and from the outside they look very non-generic, and that's probably mostly because, well, the generic interface is of course kubectl apply -f the whole directory, and then things get created and it works. But
Just works. Yeah.
I've tried to convert some of these to Nomad, to use with GCS buckets, for instance, and it was just difficult to put that into a secure frame, like where you're running containers as privileged. Never feels that
Yeah,
good to my
that's a hard pill to swallow.
yeah.
Don't really know what to tell you.
yeah, especially trying to automate that.
Okay, so nothing in the pipeline for that yet. Another thing that somebody was wondering, they were looking into using Nomad, and they want to be able to submit jobs as a user, which works obviously, but then they'd also want that job to run as that user. Is there any ways to do that?
I'm not quite sure what you mean. What's the difference between submitting a job?
So
as a user?
let's say I am user, I don't know, user ID 2000 or something on a system, and then I want to submit it as that and have the process running as that.
I've never heard of someone ask that feature before. That's interesting.
Because apparently, and since you are coming from a Mesos background, apparently there's something called Slurm.
Okay.
I've never heard of it either, and I've used Mesos in the past as well.
Isn't that from Futurama? Like,
it might be, but apparently that could do something like that. So basically, they're looking for a guarantee that tasks submitted by a user would be running as a user, and I cannot directly think of a way to do that. I'm hoping Charlie goes crazy in the chat now and answers it.
Yeah, I'm kind of watching the chat too.
So
no, I think that feels a little weird.
So Chris does say in chat that there is a user config parameter for exec, so you can actually have it run as a certain user there, and he thinks that also exists for Docker. But then obviously that would probably be inside the container for Docker in that case, I would assume.
Sure. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the only way this is going to work right now with Nomad is if you generate a new job file or use a parameterized job to submit these things and like do some kind of introspection on somehow whoever is submitting the job. It'd be very not pleasant user experience, I think, right now. And like, as someone's pointing out in our chat, like the submitting user, Nomad supports like an API client. Like you can submit that job from anywhere, from any machine. Like how do you even know that user exists on the other machine, or that they map to the same like permissions or anything like that? Like this is it's not a feature I think I feel good about. Say that.
Yeah. Someone pointed out that Slurm is apparently a scheduler used in supercomputers. And I have never touched a supercomputer yet, so Obviously, I've never heard of Slurm.
Same here.
Um, let's see if there's any other one. Yeah, there's a lot of people coming up with interesting solutions and workarounds to get this working. One is using a helper job that's running in Nomad as well, and dynamically insert vault policies. But it is possible apparently. So yes.
Interesting. Maybe there's room for better UX here that we just don't know about.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
I've never thought of that use case myself, but it would probably have to do with auditing or maybe like blast radius.
Yeah, I think another use case is like sometimes Nomad, like all of the security features are just ignored, and then people build a layer on top of Nomad, which implements all their security and all their echoes and all that kind of stuff. And maybe in that use case, it would make sense to have this feature. I guess, I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe. All right. So I don't see any questions in the chat right now. So I'm gonna ask you one, and I think I asked Christian and Schmeigel this earlier as well. What is the craziest use case you've seen for Nomad? Because I always love hearing those.
Craziest use case. Honestly, I haven't been here long enough to see the crazy ones.
Yeah, I mean, I think like Nick has a lot of like when I heard about the Southwest seat getter parameterized job, I was like, wow, okay, like I guess I really need to start automating more of my life. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I know of one. Roblox has kind of talked about their setup, and they run Nomad on Nomad, which always sounded like a thing that you could do.
Yeah, and that was mostly for upgrading reasons, right?
I think it's upgrading kind of they want the management plane only accessible by SREs or something, and then the rest of it is usable by, or the under Nomad is only accessible by SREs, and then the one that sits on top of that is accessible by normal job submitters, that kind of thing.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, things you can do. Yeah.
Yeah, and what was your craziest one, Drew? You didn't give us one.
Mine was
the Nick.
Yeah, that's more of a fun one.
Yeah, Nomad is a fun tool to use at home.
Yeah,
you can do.
I mean, it's great how flexible it is. You can just write a device plugin or a task driver for anything. Like it's not just Docker. So I don't know. We've had people during hack days do things with like Raspberry Pi, like e-readers or USB device plugins, and it only takes a day or two, and then all of a sudden you only have Nomad jobs that work when you plug in a certain USB device. So
yeah,
why not? It's really flexible in that way, which is just always fun.
Yeah, this makes me think of a device driver that I was working on a while back, which was an IKEA device driver to automate the lights that I had at that point, since they have like the smart home thing now. And then thinking of Nick's use case, like I could probably use the parameterized jobs for that to just trigger the lights, like send the parameter on off.
Yeah.
Now, like I know what I'm doing this weekend. Okay, so we just got a nice question. What is a typical way users manage Nomad job files? One large repo containing all the jobs, or distributed where job files exist in independent Git repos?
Every possible answer you can think of, people are doing it. I think if you're talking about local development, I have like my own just kind of private repo with all the job files I've ever used to like develop a feature or recreate someone's problem, and it's just super convenient to just go back and look at what I did for this other thing and like try to remind myself what Nomad's even capable of. But if you're talking about production environments, man, that's going to be super specific to like your environment and like what your hopefully security team's policies are and that kind of thing. I don't know whether you're using CI/CD versus push button deploys or something like that.
Yeah, like I'm seeing some interesting solutions from the chat where someone started off with one repository with all the jobs, but they are now actually moving towards putting the job files with the applications, which would be the way I would do it personally, to have all that together.
Yeah, I mean, we could bike shed this until the end of time.
Yeah.
Like you could even go as far as like putting the job file in the same repo as your code, and then like if you change the code or the job file, that triggers a deploy and all the automation kicks in.
Our cloud SRE team has a mega repo of all their Nomad jobs, just to provide one data point. But then, you see people that come around and they don't have job files. Like their organization is able to standardize to the point where they have like a service job file, and then they just use it for templating and use the API or something like that, where there aren't really job files. They just have lots of services and tasks running. Yeah,
that's fun.
One way to do it.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people are using the tool that James Rosell built, Levant, to also like handle some of this job file generation, which makes sense.
Oh, certainly,
yeah. So I'm just scanning the chat quickly. Oh, nope. No, I think we've had most of it. Are there any questions you would like to throw in here or ask the chat? Let's just turn it all around. No?
I'm trying to, I don't know, I could ask a million questions, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then I guess we're gonna, well, we're nearly on time as well, 8 minutes. I think it's fine to wrap up then. So we will publish this video, so you can watch it later on YouTube for your reference if you need any answers on other questions. And you can expect another one of these in about 2 weeks. So
Seth, do you want to take the last question?
Oh, did we just get one?
Yeah, the ETA on Docker soft memory limits.
Oh, well.
It's being worked on is about as much as I think I'm allowed to say. There's been a lot of feedback. I think the way we approach the problem, or whatever solution we come up with, can be contentious. Like there's a lot of opinions. So right now I'm just working on an RFC that kind of like explicitly enumerates what the different components that actually belong under this umbrella are, and then provide a solution for, at the very least, Docker device driver to use soft memory limits. No promises on when it'll be ready, but I do plan on kind of giving the RFC to the community for additional feedback beyond just like what we come up with here. So hopefully we'll find a solution for this that actually like works for everybody.
We got a follow-up on that one as well. Will it just be a soft memory limit or a smarter kernel out of memory killer with grace time?
Great question. As of this exact moment, I think the approach I'm kind of leaning towards, and this still needs to be debated among my team and then HashiCorp at large and then the community, is to do kind of what Kubernetes or Borg, I guess, really allegedly does, which is they let you, this is all hearsay, kind of establish like an amount of memory on a machine that you want to dedicate to memory overrun. And then in individual tasks, you'd be able to specify how much that individual task is allowed to use in memory overrun. And with those two components working together, you can have the ability to solve both the problem of wanting to oversubscribe your machine. So say you said like your Nomad can use 120% of the physical memory on this machine. And then your tasks would of course be able to really fix the bursting use case where you maybe have like a JVM that starts up and uses 2 gigs of memory and then uses 128 megabytes after that. So you'd have like your soft memory, your allocated or reserved memory at only 256 megabytes, or whatever, and then it'd be allowed to burst as much as it needs, given that there's like enough physical memory. And like the thing that makes this hard is that Nomad would then have to become an out of memory killer, right? Right now, we just let the kernel take care of things. Like you exceed your C group limit that your resources are allocated for, it's fine. The kernel just kills you and the task gets restarted somewhere else. If we do this, what I've just described, like we have to actually implement an out of memory killer in Nomad, which is doable, but it takes a lot of design, a lot of effort, a lot of testing to get it right so that it's reliable and safe and what people actually want.
And cross-platform.
And cross-platform, God.
Oh, you didn't want me to put that one in there?
Yeah, so we support the big three, right? And maybe even unofficially, like things like FreeBSD. So make sure all that stuff works.
Yeah, because I can imagine like building the out-of-memory killer like requires a totally different implementation for Windows than it does for Linux.
I don't know, man. I keep hearing Windows is embedding Linux now, so just.
I'm actually running on Windows 10, and the integration is actually fairly good.
Is it? Awesome.
Yeah, it's, I can recommend it.
All right.
Oh, Christian is happy with the solution. So yes, he will probably contribute to it. So that's good. Nice.
Awesome.
You have that one.
Great. That's wonderful. Yeah.
All right. So we're almost on time. So I'd just like to thank both of you for joining and answering all these questions above your pay grade. That was you're going to have to work on that one. I'm not going to help with that. But thank you so much, and thank you everybody that was in the chat to join us and asked all the questions, and also the questions on the forums. So as I said, we're going to be doing these continuously, and I believe the next one is scheduled in 2 weeks. So if you already have questions that you didn't get to ask on this edition, please send them in. We will create a topic on the forum for the next episode, and we'd love to answer those. So with that, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah,
and see you later.